this computer. Oh, hi, guys. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will realize we are in the middle of the lecture and the first part is like completely missing. That's because I forgot to press record, but that's okay. We actually just started the digestive system. What you missed was like a summary on the lecture 6. Not vital, okay, although perhaps a little bit useful to kind of sort that. But everything you needed to know is going to be in the study guide answer. Okay. Sorry about that. And of course, if you have any question, you know where to find me. You can just email me. Okay. All right. Carrying on. Depending on which part of the GI tract you are at, the kind of epithelial tissue that you have would be different. Okay. So let me give you some examples of different types of epithelial tissue. Just like a quick crash course, right? So we have things like squamous. Okay, which are like flat and kind of like a sunny side up egg. You have your flat cells and you have your nucleus there. And for squamous, there are two types. We have simple squamous, which means one layer only. And these are very delicate, and it's not meant for protection. Right? You would have simple squamous in places where you want things to go through relatively easily. So like in the alveoli, for example, there would be simple squamous epithelial tissue because diffusion occurs there, right? You want oxygen and the carbon dioxide to be able to pass through with relative ease. So that's where you would have simple squamous. Stratify means multiple layers. Okay, and these are good for protection, right? So like in the mouth, you would have the stratified squamous, multiple layers, because we put all sorts of stuff in the mouth, right? Some are cold, some are hot, some are abrasive, right? We don't want to be bleeding every time we eat, so we want to have multiple layers for protection. So that's some of the examples. Okay, we can look at some more examples later. In fact, in the respiratory system, we learn about the ciliated columna, right? That's another type of epithelial tissue. Right? So depending on which part of GI tract we are at, the type of epithelial tissue that you have would be different. What is the mucosa for? Well, mucosa is responsible for digesting the food, absorbing the nutrients, and secreting various mucus that would help lubricate the food and help propel it forward. Okay, so these things are carried out by different types of epithelial tissue as well. Okay, so outside of the mucosa, we are going from deepest layer to the most superficial, right? So mucosa is the deepest layer, and outside of that, we have our submucosa. Okay, I have a question in a private message. Where do you find the pseudostratify? Yeah, so pseudostratify was in the airway, right, in the trachea, right? And we don't actually have those in the GI tract. All right, so the submucosa, it's outside of the mucosa, and this is the layer where you will have the blood vessels, the lymphatic vessels, and nerve endings, right? Blood vessels are there for obvious reasons. Okay, you're gonna nourish your GI tract with nutrients and oxygen, and take away the waste product, right? Like what blood vessels normally do for you. But more importantly, for blood vessels that are located in the submucosa of your small intestine, right? They would be responsible for absorbing nutrients, right? That's where the main site of absorption occurs, in the later parts of the small intestine, as we'll see. So, the proteins that you have broken down into amino acids, those amino acids have to go into your blood vessels, right? And that occurs at the submucosa of the later part of your small intestine. There's a lymphatic vessels carrying functions of immune defense, because all sorts of stuff that we're eating, they have pathogens in them, right? And we want to get rid of them before they make us ill. And of course, sometimes if we eat something that's like particularly spoiled, or like if they have like turned bad or something, right, then we do get ill from it, right? We get food poisoning. So there are limitations as to how much the lymphatic system can deal with, can cope with all these pathogens. And one last thing that is found in the submucosa is going to be the nerve endings. Okay, so we have feelings from our guts, right? Like sometimes you feel things moving through, right? And you have stomach pain sometimes, right? All those feelings are going to be conveyed by nerve, right? And of course, there are different types of receptors there as well, like nociceptors, but that would be visceral nociceptors, right? As opposed to somatic, right? So those are found in the mucosa, submucosa rather. There are special clusters of lymph nodes that you will find in the intestine. They are called the Peyer's patch. And once again, they are there for immune surveillance. Outside of the submucosa, we have the muscularis. The muscularis is a layer that has smooth muscle, right? Your intestinal tract, your GI tract actually needs to squeeze the food forward. Food don't just slide down, okay? Like as a kid, I had this picture that the food just literally slide down like a kid, like a person on a slide, right? But it's not true. Okay? It takes effort for you to move the food through your gut. So there has to be some kind of squeezing. A good way to think about this is think about having like a tennis ball, and then you try to squeeze it through a stocking or through like a long sock, right? Once you put the tennis ball in, it's kind of stuck, right? It's not going to move on its own. You must squeeze it forward. All those squeezing actions, it's not voluntary action, right? You don't think about, movement of your GI tract voluntarily, right? All this is done through your autonomic nervous system, okay? Does anybody remember which branch is responsible for moving your food along the GI tract? Seems like a long time ago that we learned it, but which division of the nervous system is responsible for moving food along your GI tract? Musculo. That's not really a division of the nervous system, though, right? All right, I'll narrow it down for you guys. Is it the sympathetic nervous system or the parasympathetic nervous system?
Parasympathetic.
Yeah,
Parasympathetic.
so it's like a 50-50 guess, right? Yeah, it's a parasympathetic, okay? Yeah, parasympathetic is the rest and digest mode, right? Okay, so that's gonna stimulate all the smooth muscle in the muscularis, and it's gonna help push the food along the gut. Okay, so there are two layers of muscles. One is called the circular. Okay, so if you think about the circle that I'm forming with my hand, that's the lumen. Circular will allow like squeezing motion, small and big and small and big. Okay, and then longitudinal would be like pushing it forward. Okay, pushing it forward. It's really hard for me to kind of show you, but there is going to be the circular one here on the inside. Okay, circular like that. And then outside of the circular, I'm going to draw another layer. That's going to be longitudinal. Okay, so the longitudinal, it's parallel to the length of the GI tract, and then the circular one is the inner layer. There are two layers here. So again, circular squeeze and longitudinal push. So squeeze, push, then you're gonna let the food go forward, right? Now the stomach has an extra layer that is, on the inside. Sorry, the stomach has an extra layer that's inside of the circular layer, and that's called the oblique. Right? Oblique means diagonal. So not only do you have to squeeze the content and push them around, you also have to do a little bit of twisting. Okay, a little bit of twisting that allows the churning of the food, and it mixes it with the digestive enzymes, and that way it is going to be able to digest the food properly. Okay, so there was the muscularis, and I'm just repeating myself here. And then outside of the muscularis, we have the serosa. The serosa is the outermost layer of the GI tract, and they are supported by connective tissue. It basically helps your gut to attach to the surrounding structure, right? So they're not gonna be sliding out of place when we lie down, for example, right? You want your intestine to be attached to the inner walls of your abdomen, right? And the serosa actually secretes this lubricating fluid called the serous fluid. And as contents move through the inside of these structures, a lot of times the intestines they kind of rub past each other, and we want it to be as frictionless as possible. So those are the 4 layers of your GI tract. And it's really hard to see here if you look at even if in this particular drawing. But the mucosa again is it's actually very folded up. It's not a smooth interior, like the blood vessels, right? I keep on saying blood vessels has to have a smooth interior to prevent the blood from clotting. But for the intestine, the mucosa actually is all folded up like that. And one of the reasons for that is to enable expandability, right? In case things they have to, like really big chunks is trying to move through, you want to be able to expand a little bit, but also to increase the surface area, right? So the dark purple here, that's the mucosa, and then the submucosa is the lighter blue that's surrounding it. And then you have the 2 layers of the muscle, right? This darker purple here, that's the circular muscularis, and then outside of that, that would be the longitudinal muscularis, and then the serosa is just going to be on the outside. They call it the adventitia here, but for us, we're just going to call it the serosa. It's the outermost layer. So we're going to be labeling some of these things in the lab, which the lab will take up next class as well. Okay, so that you can do your lab quiz. All right, let's take a look at this here, see if you know the answers. I'll launch the poll for you. Please go ahead and try that. Okay, I'm just gonna give you guys half a minute for that one. Yeah, submucosa, right? Very good. If you have been with me, this time you would know the answer. Okay, so that's just one poll question. Moving on, we're gonna go through this journey from the mouth to the anus, and see what's going on along the way. And like I said, it's really basic, straightforward stuff. I hope it's gonna be a relaxing lecture for you. Fun fact, a human produces over 1 liter of saliva every day, majority of which we will absorb back by swallowing. Okay, if you spit out all the saliva you have, you're gonna get dehydrated very easily. That's just a candy, in case you're wondering what that is. Like, if you suck on a candy, you actually stimulate the secretion of saliva, right? Okay, so the mouth, what's the mouth for? Well, the mouth is the location where both physical and chemical digestion is going to take place. Okay, remember chemistry class, you learn about physical change and chemical change. It's the same thing here, right? Physical digestion is like physical change. You're not really changing the chemical nature of the food, right? So, think about putting food into the mouth, you're chewing down. The chewing action will break it down into smaller pieces, right? And that's a physical change. But there are a little bit of chemical change, chemical digestion that are taking place as well. We're going to get to that part in a bit. We learned this last lecture. There are these rough projections on the tongue called papillae, right? They're a little cylindrical, right? Someone was asking, right? Are those white dots your taste buds? No, not really, right? The white dots, or like the dots, they are the papillae, and then the 2 papillae, there are a little gap for the chemicals to go through, and then the taste buds would be on the lateral side of those papillae, right? And the mouth, the roof of the mouth is separated from the nasal cavity. We learned that from the respiratory system. Okay, so there are two parts. There is the hard palate that's at the front, and then which is made up of two bones. Okay, we have the maxilla as well as the palatine bones. Okay, so the maxilla, if you just push your tongue up, right, the front part, that's made up of the maxilla. That's also the same bone that creates the socket for your upper row of teeth to insert in. Okay, so in fact, if I put my hand here, right, I'm feeling my maxilla. Okay, all this is maxilla, and then it goes inside and forms the front part of your hard palate. And then the palatine bone forms the posterior 1/3 of your hard palate. We will learn these bones when we get to the bone unit. Okay, so don't get too hung up on them. Here is a picture that shows you if you take a transverse section here and you look at it from below, right? This highlighted one here, that's the palatine bone. The palatine bone actually forms part of your eye socket as well. We'll see that later on. And over here, that is your maxilla. Okay, so if you push your tongue out, right, and push it against your teeth here, you are actually feeling your maxilla. Okay, and if you curl your tongue back a little bit, then you will be able to feel your palatine bone. Okay, so this whole thing is the hard palate, right? And on top of the hard palate, that's where your nasal cavity is going to be. Soft palate is like further back. It's kind of hard to feel with the tip of your tongue, but if you feel like, it's really hard to explain this. Like this is this is your tongue, right? You can move your tongue out and you can touch the soft palate with these regions of the tongue, right? Okay. It feels soft. I mean, you can stick your finger in too, right? But not too deep because you know you're gonna trigger the gag reflex. But the soft palate is formed by muscle mostly and glandular tissue that secretes mucus, that creates a mucus lining coating. And the soft palate ends in a finger-shaped projection called the uvula. It's not the first time we talk about the uvula, right? Uvula is that thing that dangles at the back of your throat. And it seals up the nasal cavity when we are swallowing, so food doesn't end up coming out of our nose. The act of chewing is called mastication. There's like always unnecessarily complicated words to describe simple things in this course, right? But you know, don't blame me. I'm just the messenger. So chewing is called mastication, and there are two muscles that is necessary for this action. Okay, we'll learn about them later on in the course. But you know, one of them is the temporalis. If you put your hand on the temple here and you pretend to be chewing, you can feel it moving, right? So there's actually a muscle here that helps move the jaw. And then there's another one that goes all the way down, right? To actually pull your jaw back up after it goes down. So that is chewing, mastication. And we used to have 20 baby teeth, if you remember that. And by age 6 and 7 or 8, they start falling off one at a time. And then soon, by the age of 9 or 10, you would have replaced all of them. And you might have new ones that are coming out as well. So adults, they have 32 teeth. And some people have to remove the third molar, right? We call them the wisdom teeth because they are in the way, right? Because mine actually came out like sideways. So like this is the tooth in front of it, and instead of coming out like that, they came out sideways and it's pushing my whole jaw out. So they had to remove mine. I removed all 4 of them in one go, and it was not a pleasant experience. Now, different teeth has different shape and they're for different function. For example, we have the incisors. Incisors are the ones that are at the front, and they are just for biting. Right? Think about biting an apple, right? We don't bite an apple like on the side, right? That's like not ergonomic, right? We bite it with the front teeth. That's the incisors for clipping, chipping, and biting. The canine is the pointy one. Okay, like the dogs, they have very sharp canine, right? Ours is not as sharp, but nevertheless is still quite pointy, and that's for tearing food. If you have something that's particularly chewy, right? Or if you're eating like a piece of jerky or something, you really got to pull that off. You will be using your canine. Premolar is for grinding, and then molar also for grinding and crushing teeth. I'm not going to test you on what they do. Okay, like it's just common sense, right? Like if you forget what they do, just think about how you eat certain type of food, right? Like if you're trying to eat like a walnut, right? Okay, like where you're gonna crack the walnut, you're not gonna crack it with the incisor, you're not gonna crack it with the canine, you're gonna crack it with the teeth that are further at the back, right? Okay. So, talking about accessory organs, which are these things that add things to your GI tract, right? One of the first things that needs to be added to your GI tract occurs in the mouth, and that's done through the salivary glands, which is the first set of accessory organs. So you have 3 pairs of salivary glands, which means a total of 6. We have them behind, next to the ear, right? Those are called the parotid salivary gland. Those are the glands that are responsible for secreting most of the saliva when we were not eating. Okay? We have the submandibular gland, okay, which is below your lower jaw. Your lower jaw is called the mandible, right? So that's why they're called submandibular. It's right here. You can kind of, put your thumb over here. Right? Those are the location. And you have sublingual glands. This one is below the tongue. When you go to the dentist, if you go to the dentist at all, right, the hygienist, when they're cleaning your teeth, they always have that thing that, try to suck your saliva out, right? And they're always poking around at the sublingual gland because that's the one that's secreting primarily during that process. Together, they secrete 1 to 1.5 liters of saliva per day, which is quite a bit, quite a bit. So what's saliva for? Well, it's mostly just water, right? But it does contain a little bit of an enzyme called amylase. Okay? You remember amylose? Amylose from last semester? Amylose is a long chain of glucose, basically found in starch in most cases. And the amylase will start to break down the amylose into shorter chains of glucose, right? Or even into individual glucose. So that is chemical digestion. Oh, by the way, as I go through the lecture, you should pay attention to where the macromolecules get chemically digested at initially. So, carbohydrates, it's going to start being broken down chemically in the mouth. Okay? Proteins will happen at a later stage, and lipids will happen at a different stage. Okay, so try to pay attention to where things are initially broken down at. So these amylase will break down the amylose, the carbohydrates, the starch that is found in things like pasta, rice, right? All these things, and it will turn them into shorter chains of glucose or individual glucose even. So if you just eat like plain bread, okay, like not sweetened bread, just like plain bread, they're like kind of tasteless, right? If you don't put anything on it, they're kind of tasteless. But if you keep on chewing it for a while, like keep on chewing it for like a minute or so, then it will start to turn a little bit sweet. Okay, that's because the amylase in your saliva starts to break down the amylose, and then it's releasing individual glucose. And when you have that in your mouth, then you start tasting the sweetness. Yeah, but usually we don't keep the food long enough in the mouth for us to detect them. Okay, and then those amylase, once it get mixed in with the food and you swallow it, it will continue its action. Saliva is also important for moistening the food and preparing it for swallowing. If you ever eat things that are really dry and it almost hurts to swallow it, right? Okay, you need to drink some water to wash it down, what people say, right? So saliva is supposed to help, lubricate it, make it moist so it's easy to swallow. It also contains lysozyme, which we learned in lecture 3, and some antibodies, which helps keep the bacterial growth in check. So before people do all sorts of crazy stuff on like TikTok and YouTube, eating those Tide Pods, right? Before they do all those crazy things, one of the things that they used to do was the cinnamon challenge. Okay, I don't know if you heard of that before. Basically, the person have to swallow a spoon of cinnamon, and if you never tried that before, or if you ever never eaten cinnamon before, it's actually really hard to swallow cinnamon because cinnamon sucks up moisture um, pretty well. So when you put a spoon of cinnamon, it actually dries up your mouth completely. And when it's really, really dry, as I told you in the last slide, it's almost impossible to swallow it. And what happened was one person actually died from attempting this because the powder got caught in the airway as he was trying to swallow it, and he was not able to breathe. Okay, so it's a very dangerous thing actually, but it illustrates a point that we actually do need the saliva, right? And then we need moisture to swallow the food. We can't swallow things dry. Okay, the pharynx, a familiar body part that we have talked about previously, that connects the mouth to the esophagus, and is of course also the common passageway for air as well, right? So during swallowing, the epiglottis will seal the glottis. Remember, the glottis leads to it's the opening, right? Opening to the larynx, and you want to seal that off because the larynx is going to lead to the trachea. So we don't want food to go down the wrong tube and cause us to choke. And the uvula will close the nasopharynx so that food's not going to go up, right? Okay. So this ball here, this like a ball of food that our tongue rolls it up into and then swallow that, one unit of that is called a bolus. B-O-L-U-S, bolus. That's just a unit of food that we swallow. Okay? And then this bolus, this ball thing, is going to get pushed down the esophagus and along the rest of the way in the GI tract. All right, going down to the esophagus now. The esophagus is, of course, parallel to your trachea. Do you guys remember if it's behind the trachea or in front of the trachea? The esophagus, is it posterior or anterior to the trachea? Yep, posterior is correct. It is behind the trachea, right? Remember, the trachea has these C-shaped rings, right? That goes around it and leaves a little bit of gap behind for the esophagus. Okay, so that goes all the way down, and we have the diaphragm here, and the stomach is right below the diaphragm, right? So the esophagus actually has to go through the diaphragm, and there is an opening in the diaphragm that allows that to occur. That opening in the diaphragm is called the esophageal hiatus. Right? Esophageal hiatus is the hole in the diaphragm. Okay. In some cases, for some people, the stomach try to squeeze itself through the esophageal hiatus, and that creates like a herniation. It's very painful, and sometimes it needs to be fixed with surgery. So the esophagus is lined with stratified, which again means multiple layers of squamous epithelium, okay, multiple layers of flat cells, and that's important, right? Just like the mouth, like all sorts of stuff passes through the esophagus, right? Things that are abrasive, right? Eating the chips are actually very abrasive, especially if you like those kernel chips, right? They're really hard and it could easily damage the lining if we don't have multiple layers of protections. Hot and cold stuff, chemical exposure, right? Things that are acidic, right? Alcohol is particularly irritating for the GI tract in some cases, right? So we need those protections from the stratified squamous. So ordinarily, the esophagus is collapsed. Okay? When there's no food going through it, it just kind of closes up and only opens when the bolus, the unit of food, is passing through it. And those contractions that we have, the squeeze and the push that I keep on talking about from the muscularis, right? Those squeezing, pushing action is what we call peristalsis. Peristalsis. And again, this is smooth muscle that's doing its thing, right? It's completely involuntary. We cannot stop it. We cannot make it happen at will. Okay. I mean, we can trigger it by, eating food, but we cannot, just using voluntary control to initiate these peristalsis. Okay. It's not in the primary front motor cortex. Okay. There's no nerve going to these locations. Then from the esophagus to the stomach, there's actually a sphincter. Right? A sphincter is kind of like valves in the heart. They prevent things from going backwards under normal circumstances, and there's one right here at the beginning of the stomach, at the end of the esophagus. That is called the cardiac sphincter. Right? Some textbook call it the lower esophageal sphincter. It means the same thing because it's located at the lower end of the esophagus, and it's called cardiac sphincter because it's very close to the heart as well. Okay, so that is going to keep things in the stomach, right? So they don't come back out. But of course, when we vomit, they actually do go through the sphincters. So unlike the heart valves, which does a very good job at preventing things from going back, right? These sphincters will fail at some point in our lives, and things will have to come up. Okay. So ghost pepper. There's this article that I saw about a man who was trying to do the ghost pepper challenge. Okay, that's another thing that people do on YouTube. Apparently, they eat these ghost peppers that are supposed to be really, really, really hot, and it was so hot, so irritating that it burns a hole in the person's esophagus. And he actually had to be hospitalized for 3 months and be fed directly into the stomach with a tube as his esophagus healed. So that was a long recovery. But what is spiciness, right? What is hotness? Apparently, the how spicy something is measured with this particular scale. Okay, and they use this SHU unit to see how hot something is. Okay, so things that we are familiar with, right? Okay, like if you add Tabasco or like sriracha to your food, to your noodles and whatnot, right? To your chicken wings, right? That's how hot it is. Like so sriracha is 2200. Okay, this is from their website. Okay, Tabasco is a little bit hotter. Okay, but when we talk about like a ghost pepper, right, or jalapeno, do we have jalapeno here? I can't really see it. It's kind of pretty small. Oh, jalapeno is right here. So jalapeno is about 3,500 to 4,500 units, right? Still a little bit manageable for a lot of people, right? A lot of people have jalapeno on their pizza, for example. Okay, but once we get to the ghost pepper, it's like a million unit, right? So it's substantially more spicy than common hot sauces. And the really, really hot one nowadays, like the one that they breed, they make these things by breeding different peppers, and the one that is the hottest right now, the most spicy, is called the Carolina Reaper, right? 2.2 million SHU, and you can look it up and see how it looks like on YouTube. So what's causing these spiciness? Remember I told you spiciness is not it's not a taste, right? It's more like a sensation. Okay, which is why you can just be smelling spicy food and then it will start causing you, you feel the sting in the eye, and then you might start sweating. Right? All those feeling is actually caused by this chemical called the capsaicin. Okay? So capsaicin is the active ingredient in what's making things spicy. Right? So when you bite into a pepper, right, the more capsaicin it has, the higher it is in the Scoville chart. So that's a lot more capsaicin than something like sriracha, and you know, release it as a fine spray into your mouth, and it actually triggers the heat receptors, the thermal receptors in the skin. Okay, that's why like you don't physically have to eat the pepper. You can just rub pepper on yourself, and you will start having a reaction. Okay, so by triggering the heat receptor, it tricks your nervous system into thinking that you're actually overheating, and in response, your brain crank up all these mechanisms to cool the body, right? That's why there is the sweating, right? That's why there is the you know, tingly sensation, all these things, right? Your hair might stand up a little bit, right? And all that is to neutralize the feeling of getting overheated. How do we stop it? Well, you see people who go to these pepper eating contests, they usually have milk, right? Because milk has a special protein called casein, and it will stick to capsaicin, which is hydrophobic molecule, and it will help carry them away. It helps them bind together and just wash it away. And the sugar solution also works because the capsaicin will react with sucrose and it will get neutralized that way. Anyway, just thought that was interesting to share. Okay, let's do one more over here. Go ahead. Yep, everybody who participated got it right. That's very good. And this one also should be pretty straightforward. Okay, this one is the carbohydrates, right? Because the saliva has the amylase, and the amylase will break down the amylose, which is a type of carbohydrates in the mouth. Okay, another one here. Okay, correct answer is the stratified squamous. Okay, multiple layers of flat cells. That's for you know, excellent protection. There is no such thing as stratified columna that exists in the body. That's just like something that I made up. Okay, we'll take a quick break right now. We'll resume at 9:41. We'll do more then. Okay, see you in a bit. All right, let's keep going. So, we have gone through the esophagus. The peristalsis wave-like contraction has pushed the bolus down the esophagus through the cardiac sphincter, and then we're gonna be in the stomach now. Okay. So just to, I'm sure I have a picture coming up later, but whatever. Let's just draw it out now. That's the way that I draw the stomach, and up here, that's where the cardiac sphincter is. And then down here, that's where the pyloric sphincter is going to be. Okay. So like I said, the cardiac sphincter will keep the food in the stomach and prevents it from coming up. Although sometimes there is a little bit of regurgitation that's going on. Some people suffer from what's called a GERD, right? Acid refluxes. And the content of the stomach kind of comes back up and it irritates the lower esophageal region. And that could create constant heartburn, right? It's called heartburn because it feels like it's, your heart that's burning, but it's really because the lower esophagus, it's very close to where the heart is, and the irritation of that part actually feels like it's you're having a burning sensation from the heart. The pyloric sphincter will regulate the flow of chyme into the small intestine. This goes to the small intestine next, right? Small intestine. And what is chyme? Well, you have all these stomach acid, which we'll talk about later, but the food is going to go into it. All that mixing and turning will help digest the food. And typically food stays in the stomach for like 2 to 4 hours, depending on what you're eating. Okay. If you're eating oatmeal, then, after half an hour is ready to move forward, right? But if you're eating like meat, if you just had a big chunk of a steak or something, then it's going to take a longer time for you to digest that meal, right? But ultimately, when the food is ready to move on, it has to be in this soapy acidic mixture, okay? And we call that stuff chyme. Okay, not to be gross or anything, but like anytime you vomit, you throw up, the stuff that comes up, that's basically what chyme looks like. Okay, and in that state, in that half digested soapy acidic mixture, right, that's when it's ready to go on to the small intestine, and then the pyloric sphincter will release a little bit of it at a time. Okay, you don't want to flood the small intestine with this chyme because it's acidic, right? You want to let a little bit move on at a time so that you would be able to cope with the acid. And we'll get back to that part later on. So talking about the stomach, there is a story to be told. Much of the understanding of how the stomach works actually came from the study of this man named Alexis St. Martin. He was like a voyager, Canadian voyager, in the 1800s. He was traveling from port to port, and what happened was one time he accidentally got shot standing next to someone with a rifle, I think, and it got discharged accidentally, and that left a hole in his stomach. Okay. So an army doctor named William Beaumont was called to help him, and he patched him up, and miraculously he survived the incidents, and his body started to heal. But the gun, in addition to making a hole in his abdomen, actually made a hole in his stomach as well. And as he was healing, the hole in the stomach actually get fused with the hole that was in his upper abdomen, and create what's called a fistula. Okay, a fistula is like a connection between two body parts that normally should not be connected. Okay, sometimes it happens. As a result of injury, and sometimes people are just born with these kind of things. Okay, so he had a fistula, Fistula. That's how you spell it. So that fistula connected the hole in the stomach and then the hole in his abdomen, like I said. Okay, so Beaumont, the army doctor, instead of fixing that hole, okay, patching it up or something, he decided that this was a golden opportunity to study how the stomach works, because now you have direct access to the stomach, right? Okay. And at the time, ethical issues on studying on humans are very loose. Okay, it's yeah, there's no like regulating body, right? So I don't know if he actually had the consent of them. I guess he would have to have a bit of consent, because after all, the guys could like stop him from experimenting on him, right? But then I don't know if he was coerced into it or something. Okay. Anyway, so long story short, he had access to the stomach, so he would take a little bit of food and then put it in a pouch, and then he would put the pouch into the stomach, the hole, and then he would take it out like after half an hour and examine the contents, and he'll put it back in and take it out and examine it at, like, hour interval, right? And that's how he was able to see what the stomach does, right? He was able to extract a little bit of a stomach content to study it, right, and see what's the acid in it, right? What other substances are in this mixture. Based on what I read, mostly on Wikipedia, he performed it over 230 experiments on St. Martin, and he actually published his result. And most of what we understood about the stomach was the foundation was laid based on this interaction. Okay, so something to look up if you're interested. Just look up the man with a hole in the stomach. Okay, and then you will be able to read the whole story yourself. Okay, moving on. An empty stomach, when it's in a relaxed state, has a lot of foldings in it. Okay, kind of like a balloon that's not inflated. It has a lot of wrinkles in it. So these foldings, these wrinkles, they are called rugae. Okay? And once the stomach is full, the rugae is going to be gone. After you inflate a balloon, the wrinkles are gone. Same concept. There are 3 layers of muscle in the stomach, right? In addition to the circular and longitudinal, which you will find in the rest of the GI tract, you will also find the oblique layer. Okay, so the oblique layer, the diagonal muscle layer, will help you turn the stomach and help mix the stomach content with the gastric juice. It's really kind of like a washing machine, just tumbles and mix things together. Okay. So here we can see the 3 layers of the muscles, right? Oblique, circular, longitudinal. And we have the cardiac sphincter located up here. You cannot see it, it will be inside the stomach. And then there's the pyloric sphincter here. And connecting to the stomach is the first part of your small intestine, which we'll get to later, but it's called the duodenum if you want to know now. There's a lot of these foldings on the surface of the stomach. We call them rugae. Rugae. So if we zoom in onto the mucosa of the stomach, it's not a smooth surface. There are all these grooves that are in it. Okay, and these grooves, they are called the gastric pit. Gastric pit, and located in these pits are gastric glands. Okay, so here's another view. We have the gastric pits, and then we have the gastric gland. I think it's probably best we draw this out to help you understand it a little bit better. Let's start a note here. There we go. Okay. So like if you imagine you are like walking on the interior of the stomach, it's not a smooth landscape. Okay? It's gonna have these little depression, little pits that you can fall into. Okay, like that. It's kind of like playing Mario. You got to jump through these little gaps, otherwise you're gonna fall in, right? So these things, they are called, again, gastric pits. And at the bottom of the gastric pit, like over here, for example, right, we have the gastric gland. Okay. And located at the bottom of these glands, you would have different cell types. Okay. So you would have some like mucus cells. right? And what would the mucus cells do? Well, the mucus cells, they are going to secrete mucus that coats the lining of the stomach, right? You ever wonder why the stomach doesn't digest itself, right? The acid is really strong, right? It's hydrochloric acid with a pH of 1 to 2. It's strong enough to digest like a nail, right? Um, like a metal nail, right? But you don't digest your own stomach. That's because the mucus cells secretes a thick layer of mucus that coats your stomach. Okay, so you don't digest your own stomach. Now there are two other types of cells that we're gonna look at. Okay, so we have these things called the chief cells. Doesn't really matter if you draw them or not. Like I'm just trying to show you that they're there. So there's the chief cells, and then there is going to be the parietal cells. Parietal cells. Okay. So what do they do? Okay, now let's say we eat some proteins. Okay, proteins. So proteins are made up of amino acids, right? So here is a protein. Okay. And when it's all folded up in its 3D shape, it's really hard to break it down. Okay? So what you need to do is you have to unravel the protein. Okay? And in order to unravel the protein, we need a little bit of hydrochloric acid. So the cell that secretes the hydrochloric acid, they are the parietal cells. Parietal cells secretes the hydrochloric acid, which helps denature the protein. Okay, it unfolds it. Okay, denature protein, unfolds it like that. Then afterwards, you can start to chemically break down the denature protein. Okay, so the enzyme that helps chemically break down the protein is called pepsin. Okay? Pepsin is the active form. But when we make the pepsin, it's not always in the active form. Our body actually makes it in the inactive form, which is called pepsinogen. Remember ogen, like fibrinogen? Ogen means inactive, right? And the cell that makes the pepsinogen, is the chief cell. Okay, so chief cells makes the pepsinogen, which needs to be activated into pepsin, which would then chop the denature protein. But in order to activate the pepsinogen, you would need the HCl from the parietal cells. Okay, so the HCl does two things. It denatures the protein, and it helps activate the pepsinogen into pepsin. Okay, so the pepsin will cut the denatured proteins into small chains of amino acids, right? Or individual amino acids. Okay. Now this process is not going to be completed in the stomach. Okay. The proteins will need to be digested further later on in the GI tract, but that's where it starts. Okay. So digestion of carbohydrates begin in the mouth, but digestions of protein, they begin in the stomach. Okay. So that's basically what's going on in the stomach. Any question? All right, let's go back to the PowerPoint slides. So here it's the picture again with the gastric pits and the gastric gland. We already talked about the different cell type and what they do. So the H. pylori that I was telling you about, right? They actually bury themselves in the thick mucus layer of the stomach lining, and that's how they get protected from the acid. Okay. And when your immune system is weakened, for example, or there are some other unknown trigger, people don't fully understand why, then the H. pylori can start to eat away the mucus lining. And when they eat away the mucus lining, they bury themselves deeper into the tissue to protect themselves from the acid. But then the part of the stomach that loses the lining will now be irritated by the acid. That how that's how a person could get uh, um, stomach ulcer. Okay, so there is a test that people can do. It's like a breath test. They should just analyze your breath to see. I think it's like a ammonia that they're detecting, because that's one of the byproduct of their metabolism. And if it confirms that you have the pylori, then you have to be put on antibiotics for like almost a month, I think, to get rid of the pylori. Because people with the pylori that are in active form actually experience the heartburn, right? And the stomach ulcer pain, and it's uh, it affects their lives, right? So it's something that you needs to get treated. And also, if you leaves the stomach ulcer unattended, that could also increase the risk of getting things like stomach cancer. Okay, so that is something to know. So the stomach actually does not absorb any food, but things like alcohol and water, they could be absorbed through the stomach lining directly, but no food, no food at all. Right? That's why people say if you drink with an empty stomach, right, then it gets absorbed really, really quickly, and the person could get intoxicated relatively fast. Chief cells, right, secretes the pepsinogen, the inactive form, which once again becomes the protein digesting enzyme pepsin when you expose to the hydrochloric acid. But we do need the HCl. Without the HCl, pepsinogen will not get activated. Where do we get the HCl? We get it from the parietal cell. Okay. So the pH is about 1.5 to 2, right? Depending on the person, really, and depending on what you're eating in some cases, right? The acid pH could fluctuate a little bit. And the main function of HCl is to break down connective tissue, right? That's a physical type of digestion. Activates pepsinogen, right? Provide immune protection. And also, right, we should add it denatures protein. Okay, so you remember in lecture 3, right, we talk about chemical barriers, right? So HCl is an example of chemical barrier. Now there is one extra thing that the parietal cells secrete. It is called intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor is a sugary protein, a glycoprotein that binds to vitamin B12, and we need B12 in order to make healthy red cells. Okay, without B12, then what happens is the person will become anemic. Okay, and this could happen to people who cannot produce intrinsic factor. Okay? Because intrinsic factor is after all a protein which is encoded in the DNA. So if a person has a mutation that causes them to not be able to make intrinsic factor, then they will not be able to absorb B12. Okay, B12 will break down in the hydrochloric acid, and you won't be able to absorb it without the protection from the intrinsic factor. Okay, so some people are low in B12 for other reasons, and then they could take the supplement for B12. But if the reason that they are not getting enough B12 is because of the lack of intrinsic factor, then taking it orally is not really going to help. because a majority of it will still get broken down by the stomach acid, right? So people who have a missing intrinsic factor, they would have to receive their B12 through shots, okay, like injections, because that would bypass the stomach and go directly into the bloodstream. Okay. So just a very simple one here. Hydrochloric acid is produced by which type of cell? Yep. Again, everybody got it right. It is the parietal cells. Okay. And again, the hydrochloric acid will help activate the pepsinogen, break down the protein, so on and so forth. What enzyme is produced by chief cells? I'm gonna just tell you this one. That will be the pepsinogen. Pepsinogen. So we're almost through our digestive system. We are now past the stomach, and we will go into the small and large intestine. Small first. Your small intestine is the longest part of your GI tract. It's almost 6 to 7 times as long as your height. Okay, and it's separated into the duodenum, the first part, which is shown here in light blue. Okay? It's the shortest part of the small intestine, about a quarter of a meter, or like about 12 inches long. Okay, so very, very short compared to the rest. And then you have the jejunum. That's actually how you pronounce it. The jejunum is about 2.5 meters long. And then the ileum, which is the longest part, which is about 3.6 meters long. Okay? So the duodenum, that's where more digestion occurs. So this is for chemical digestion. And by the time you get to the jejunum and the ileum, digestion is done. Okay? So that's for absorption of nutrients. Okay. Now, because of all the digestions and the absorption that needs to be going on in the small intestine, we need to have a lot of surface area. And so there are 3 different things that exist to help increase the surface area, and it's a little bit hard to visualize. So we'll try to draw it out and see if it makes any sense. Okay. So here is like your intestinal tract, and we're looking at the lumen, the inside. So it's not like a smooth interior, okay, like the center of a toilet paper roll. It's not like that, okay. That would be more like what a blood vessel looks like. But instead, as you saw earlier, right, there are these like foldings that occurs. So if we zoom it out, then we have these foldings. Okay, so these are called circular folds. This whole thing here, circular fold. And already you can see how it increases the surface area, right? Because now it's like much longer compared to like just a plain circumference, right? Okay, so that is the circular folds. Now, if we zoom in onto the circular folds, what kind of cells makes up the circular fold? Remember, in different parts of the GI tract, we have different types of epithelial tissue, right? So here we have these columna. Columna means they're kind of rectangular in shape. Okay, so these are columnar cells. I'm just going to draw a few of them. Okay, and they will be here as well. Okay, and these columnar cells, they have little wavy stuff on them, not cilia, but they are like little wavy projections like that. Okay, so I'm gonna take one out. I'm gonna draw it like that, really big. Okay, so these little wavy stuff, those are called villi. Okay, villi. Villus is singular, one of them. a bunch of them is villi. And these finger-like projections, they further increases the surface area. Okay, but that's not it. Right? You can take one of these things and zoom it in again. Zoom in again. And if we were doing this in person, I would be showing you these things in the microscope. Okay, so that's a villus, right? Okay, villi. And if you zoom in onto one of these things, okay, they have even more projections. Right? And these are called a micro villi. Okay, so they're all here. It's like little projections on top of the projections. Do you understand this? Okay, so collectively, the circular folds, the villi, and the microvilli, right? They help increase the surface area substantially. Okay. Without the microvilli, total surface area of your small intestine is about like 400 square feet. Okay, but with all these extra foldings, it's as big as like 2,200 square feet. Right? So substantially increases the surface area available for reactions to occur, for absorption to occur. Okay. So that's what they actually look like. The PC is just like another way of saying the circular folds. Okay. And on the circular folds, we have the villi, right? You can really see it here, but that would be like a little cell right here. Oops, that would be like a little cell here with a hair. I can't even draw on it there with the little hair there. So that's the villi. And then the microvilli, you would need to have a higher magnification. Okay, but let's not forget this is your GI tract, so you would still have your 4 layers, right? Serosa is right here, just the outermost layer. It's kind of peeled off in, preparing this specimen. You have your muscularis, and then the submucosa, and all these, villi and microvilli and columnar cells. They are going to be in the mucosal layer. Okay. There's something called L here, which stands for lacteal. We're going to get back to that later on. Okay. And just to help you orient yourself, this here, that's the lumen. That's the inside of the intestinal tract. That's where the food is going to be. So the duodenum, first part of your small intestine, that's where the digestion is going to continue. Okay. And it's going to be receiving secretion from another 2 accessory organs. One of them is the pancreas. Okay, so the pancreas is located behind the stomach on the left side of your body, upper left abdomen. And the pancreas is both an endocrine gland as well as an exocrine gland. And just let me tell you what the difference is. An exocrine gland, they secrete through a duct. All right. So sweat gland, that's an exocrine gland. The sweat comes out through a duct and go to the surface of your skin. The breast is an exocrine gland. This secretes milk during lactation, right? And the milk goes to the surface, right? Through a duct. That's an exocrine gland. And the pancreas is an exocrine gland because it will secrete pancreatic juice that goes to the pancreatic duct, which then goes into the duodenum. Okay, so that's the exocrine function. an endocrine gland, right? Endocrine, it secretes directly into the blood. And endocrine, the kind of secretions we're talking about would be hormones. Okay. Anybody know what hormones the pancreas secretes?
Insulin?
Yeah, excellent, right? Insulin, right? So insulin helps absorb sugar from the blood. Right? So people who are with certain types of diabetes, type 1 diabetes specifically, they would need to have insulin shot because their body's not making any. Okay? So that's the endocrine function. We'll learn about the endocrine system in the last lecture of the course. But right now, the pancreas secretes pancreatic juice through the pancreatic duct, and it goes into the duodenum. All right, I'll tell you what's in those juice in a bit. The liver, which is on the upper right quadrant of your abdomen, amongst other things that it does, it produces bile. Okay? It produces bile, and bile gets stored in the gallbladder. Right? We talked about bile briefly before, right? It contains water, it contains bilirubin, a little bit of cholesterol, and we're going to store it in the gallbladder. And when you need them, the gallbladder will secrete the bile through the bile duct, right? And again, it goes into the duodenum. In case you got lost in all these things that I'm telling you, the key point to know is that the duodenum, the first part of your small intestine, is going to be receiving two kinds of secretion, right? The pancreatic juice from the pancreas and the bile from the gallbladder. So what does the bile do? Well, bile helps break down large clumps of fat, lipids, into smaller pieces. They're kind of like detergent, okay? When you add detergent to your greasy dishes, it breaks it down into smaller clumps, and then it helps wash it away, right? Okay, so this process is called emulsification. Emulsification, right? So bile emulsifies the fat. Okay? This is not a chemical reaction. This is just like a physical digestion. Okay, it breaks a bigger clump into a smaller clump so that enzymes such as lipase will be able to gain access to it. Okay, so we have a big chunk of lipid here, and then the bile will make it into smaller droplets, and then the lipase will chemically break it down. Now, of all the places that stones can grow in the body, one place is the gallbladder. Okay, so people who have high blood cholesterols are more prone to getting gallstone, and the gallstone sometimes can get stuck in the bile duct. The bile duct is the duct that connects the gallbladder to the duodenum, right? So if a stone gets stuck here, then it's gonna be like really painful. And I know because my father had this gallstone. Okay, for the longest time, like for a year or so, the doctors just thought he was having like stomach pain, okay, because of acid reflux. So they give him these antacid, give them these like PPI, which is like proton pump inhibitors, which slow down your acid production, right? And it didn't help. Okay, and then until one night, he was just so much pain, he couldn't bear it. I couldn't go to sleep, and there's like these sharp pains coming from the abdomen. And then he went to the ER, and then they did a scan for him, and it was only then that they found out he had gallstone, right? And they had to do emergency surgery to remove his gallbladder because way any longer it might burst, they say. And then they took out his gallbladder, and he was fine afterwards. So what do you think happens to people without a gallbladder? Like, is there anything that they should do differently after they lose the gallbladder? What do you guys think? Like after you recover from the surgery, right? Obviously, like, is there certain things you should avoid eating, for example?
High fat foods?
Yeah, exactly, right. And do you know why that might be the case? Just like speculating, brainstorming here.
The gallbladder stores the bile, and the bile is what breaks down the large fats. So if you don't have a gallbladder, you have nowhere to store the extra bile. So if
That's
you don't
right.
have a lot of bile, yeah.
Exactly, right. But you still make them, right? The liver makes them. It's just that you don't have a place to store them, so you kind of make it on demand, right? Okay. So it's hard for your body to cope with all the greasy food, right? You might get like, sick from the excess fat that's not being broken down. Okay. So people without the gallbladder, you gotta watch out for greasy food. Okay? No more KFC. Right? You just have to take it easy with the diet. But eventually your body kind of regain the balance, right? And ultimately you will be fine. But at the beginning, you should avoid. So that's what these gallstones look like. They're really, really big, right? You can see here, right? This one is like super big, and like I said, right? It could cause a lot of pain. You have to remove your gallbladder. So gallbladder is not a must-have organ. Okay, you can live without it. There's a lot of things in the body that you can live without, surprisingly. Other function of the liver that are not really related to digestions, specifically, but nevertheless important. Liver helps detoxify blood by removing various byproduct of poisonous substances. When I say poisonous, I mean, um, things like alcohol, right? And too much alcohol is actually poisonous to the body, and your liver metabolize that. That's why people who drink excessively, they have liver cirrhosis, scarring of the liver, right? Medication, right? Could be bad for your liver sometimes if you use them in a prolonged period, right? Which one is not too good for your liver? Is it Tylenol or is it ethyl? Acetaminophen or ibuprofen? Do you guys know which one has a label that tells you could be bad for your liver? Or you guys didn't know about that? Well, if you didn't know, the Tylenol, the acetaminophen, that actually is not good for the liver. It could damage your liver if you use it, in prolonged periods of time. And the ibuprofen, right, the ethyl, active ingredient in ethyl, that's actually harsh on the stomach. I just thought of a story to share with you. A couple years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night and then I had this like pounding headache. Okay, and I went to get some ethyl, but then I was too lazy to go down to the kitchen and get some water. And then so I just pop it in and I try to swallow the pill, and then I went back to sleep. Okay. And then hours later, I woke up with this burning sensation in my throat, and my esophageal lining right here, upper esophagus. I was like, what the heck is going on, right? And then I, finally drink some water, and then it's just not really going away. And then I end up going to see the doctor and told him what happened. And he said, well, probably because the ethyl that you're trying to swallow, it didn't go down all the way. Right? We try to swallow it without water, it probably like gets stuck somewhere up here, and the coating start to dissolve, and all the medications start to come out, and it was just like burning the lining of your esophagus, and that's what happened, he said. Right. So I actually had to eat very mild food for like a week to wait for my lining to recover. Um, but again, long story short, the ethyl is harsh on the stomach. Okay? If you take too much, it could cause some stomach discomfort. Right? Whereas the acetaminophen is bad for the liver if you use it, you know, prolonged periods. Okay? If you just take one for headache, it's fine. Okay, but there are warning labels on them, and you can take a look next time if you don't believe me. Other things that the liver does is it will store iron, right? And the iron we extract from our bilirubin, for example, when we break down the hemoglobins. There are other vitamins that is stored there. Also makes a bunch of plasma proteins, right? The main one is albumin. We learned that in lecture 2. There are some coagulation proteins that we make, right? Fibrinogen as well. It's always a location, also a location for storing excess glucose. We store it in the form of glycogen. Okay, we also store glycogen in muscles, right? And in between meals, it will break down the glycogen back into glucose to help maintain glucose level in the blood. When blood glucose is really, really low, such as when person is fasting, right? Then the liver will convert glycerol into glucose. Glycerol is like the component of fats, right? You remember from last semester? A fat molecule is glycerol plus fatty acids. So the liver has the ability to turn fat into glucose in a process called gluconeogenesis. Okay. The new creation of glucose. Neo is new, genesis, creation, right? Creation of new glucose. So that's some of the extra function of liver. All right, enough about the liver. Let's move on to the pancreas. And so pancreas, like I said, in the context of digestion, we're looking at the exocrine function. It's going to be secreting these pancreatic juices into the duodenum. What is in this juice? Two main things. Okay? The juice contains sodium bicarbonate, NaHCO3. Okay, so this stuff is going to go into the duodenum. And remember, the duodenum is connected directly to your stomach. So when the acidic chyme is coming down from the stomach, right, we need to neutralize the chyme. The duodenum does not have the mucus protection that the stomach has. So we need to neutralize the chyme as they comes in. So the HCl AQ is going to react with the NaHCO3. Right? This is a acid and base reaction, right? And anybody want to predict the products? You guys learned this in chemistry, right? I'm sure. What would be the product of acid and base like that mixed together?
Sodium chloride.
Mm-hmm.
Sodium chloride.
Yes, very good. Sodium chloride. And what's the other one?
Water.
Yeah, close. Very good. What else? One more thing.
Carbon dioxide.
Yes, that's right. So we would have H2CO3, which then breaks down into water and CO2. Okay, there we go. Sorry, this is gas. Yeah, so sometimes people burp, right? That's the gas coming out. So that's the neutralization process. All right, that's what the sodium bicarbonate is for. If we don't have adequate secretion of sodium bicarbonate, then the acid will irritate the lining of the duodenum. Okay, and that could lead to duodenal ulcer in severe cases. The other stuff in the pancreatic juices would be a mixture of pancreatic enzymes. There are like a bunch of them, like, over 28 different enzymes that are found in these pancreatic juices. So let's take a look at some of them. Okay. So carbohydrates are going to be broken down into simple sugars such as glucose by things like amylase. We already saw amylase. So there is like salivary amylase. Amylase is found in saliva. And then there is pancreatic amylase. Okay, because again, it's very brief interaction in the mouth, right? The amylase is not going to be able to completely break down the carbohydrates in the mouth. So we got to continue that process later on. Right? We have things like lactase, which breaks down lactose. We have like maltase that breaks down maltose, and sucrase, which breaks down sucrose. So a bunch of enzymes that are designated for breaking down carbohydrates. For proteins, we will need more pepsin. Okay, so we already had some pepsin in the stomach, but now we're gonna have more pepsin in the pancreatic juice. Pepsin has a cousin named trypsin. They are related in terms of chemical functions, and there are other proteases, which breaks down protein in general. And then we have fats, which needs to be broken down by lipase. So, all those emulsification that's going on with the bile, after you break it down to smaller droplets, the lipase will finish the chemical digestions. right? So fat is not broken down until we get to the duodenum. Like carbohydrates first initially got broken down in the mouth, proteins first initially got broken down in the stomach, and fats doesn't happen until we get to the duodenum. The nucleic acids needs to be broken down into nucleotides by nucleases. All right, so there are all these bolded words. They are different kind of enzymes that you will find in the pancreatic juice. Okay, so this is just a visual representation of what it looks like. The starch, which again is primarily made of amylose. The amylase will break it down into individual maltose, okay, which are like double glucose, and it might even break it down into like individual glucose, right? But you will need to break it down further, right? So the maltase, the enzyme will break down the maltose and then into the glucose, and then you will be able to absorb it later on in the second half of the later half of the small intestine, right? In the jejunum and the ileum. Same thing for protein, right? You might have broken down some of it in the stomach, but now the acid has unraveled it, and then now we need more pancreatic proteases, right? Such as pepsin and trypsin, that will break it down into little amino acids, which you can absorb into bloodstream directly as well. Now the fats is a little bit complicated. We have the big globs, and then the bile will emulsify them, make it into smaller droplets. Then lipase will break it down into fatty acids, right? Maybe glycerol, but they cannot be absorbed into the bloodstream directly because lipid and blood, they don't mix well, right? Okay. So they are absorbed into the lymphatic system instead. Okay, and then the lymphatic system is going to take it to liver, okay? And then the liver will combine them with these lipoproteins, okay, to make it more transportable in the blood. Remember we talked about like HDL and LDL, right? So that's what happens in the liver to help make the fat soluble. Okay, more polls. Okay, interesting. I actually got answers from all over the place. Accessory organs are these things that secretes things into the GI tract, right? So salivary gland secretes saliva. That's an accessory organ. Liver secretes, bile into the GI tract through the gallbladder, and we have the pancreas that secretes the pancreatic juice. So the appendix is not the accessory organ. The function of bile. Here, you can do this one. Bile is to physically break down the fat, right? It makes it into smaller droplets. You're not changing the chemical composition of the fat, right? That comes later with the lipase, right? Okay, so this is just physically breaking them down into tiny, tiny droplets so that the lipase will be able to gain access to it. Okay, this one. Okay, yeah, that's right. Neutralize the chyme in the duodenum, right? Okay, with the neutralization reaction. Okay, we are like almost there, just like a couple more slides. So now we move on to the large intestine. Okay, by the time we get through the small intestine, and just to be clear, right? We have the duodenum, which is for digestions, and then the stuff is gonna get absorbed in the jejunum and the ileum. Okay, so after the ileum, we're gonna pass the stuff into the large intestine. Right. By the time you get to the large intestine, most of the nutrients would have been absorbed already. And the primary function of the large intestine is to absorb water. So the large intestine is divided into three parts. We have the cecum, and then we have the colon and the rectum. Okay. So between the ileum and the cecum is an other sphincter, which is called the ileocecosphincter. Ileocecosphincter. Okay. We don't want the stuff to go back from the large intestine to the small intestine. Okay, like in the large intestine is mostly like poopy stuff. Okay, so those are full of bacteria. We don't want it to go back. Okay, and here we just to take out the excess water, some salt maybe, and some vitamins. Okay, and then we will store it in the rectum until it's ready to come out. If you don't have enough dietary fibers, then it will lead to reduction in bowel movement. Okay, and that's going to lead to constipation. Okay, difficulty going to the bathroom, and food poisoning because your body's trying to get rid of the stuff that's making you sick. That's going to increase bowel movement momentarily, and so you don't have time to absorb the water, and that leads to diarrhea. From this picture, you can't really tell if he's having this problem or that problem, but either way, it's not a pleasant experience. Okay, so feces is 75% water and 25% solid. I'm not sure why we need to know that, but it was in the textbook. And the color of the feces is caused by the bilirubin, as well as oxidized iron. I remember with my first daughter, the doctor said we should supplement her with some iron. I forgot what was the reason. It was like a while back. Anyway, so we gave her the iron, and the poop was like really dark, like almost black, and I was like, oh no, what is going on, right? Like, is this normal, right? So we took a picture of the poop and then we sent it to the doctor, and then the doctor's like, oh, no need to worry, okay? It's just the iron that you're giving the baby, okay? So these oxidized iron causes discoloration of the feces. There's a colon bacteria. There's a lot of bacteria in them, and actually the bacteria are kind of helpful. They live in this symbiotic relationship with us, right? Not only do they form the normal flora for immune protection, but they also make a little bit of these vitamins that we need. Okay, so we give them a place to live, and in turns they make certain types of vitamins for us. But as a byproduct, they generate some unpleasant gas, and that could be released in the other end. Two other sphincter before the stuff comes out. We have an internal anal sphincter and the external anal sphincter. The internal one we have no voluntary control over. That's the smooth muscle. Okay, but the external one, that's the one we can control. So so we can hold it, right, so to speak, until we go to the bathroom and then do our number two, right? But babies, they don't have control over the sphincters. Okay, that's why they poop in their diapers, right? They poop anywhere, right? My nephew is just about one, and when they're changing their diaper, sometimes he gets away and he start crawling, and then he might poop on the way, right, and leave like a trail of poop on the floor. They can't control it. They have no control over the external anal sphincter. And they actually don't have control over it until about 18 months old, year and a half. Okay, the descending pathway, you remember we learned about that, it's not fully formed it yet. The myelination has not complete. So like even if they wanted to send a signal to say hold it, okay, they physically cannot do it. They don't have the infrastructure, right, to do it, right? So toilet training too early, and some people say it's just gonna drive you nuts. Okay, but you know, my wife was adamant that we started training. Our daughters at very young age, like 10 months or something. I remember these mornings we'd be sitting on the toilet and I would be like bored out of my mind, just waiting for her to to poop in the toilet. Anyways, to each their own, right? You do whatever you want, but physiologically speaking, remember they don't have the ability to control it until 18 months. And that's it for the digestive system. I hope you don't find that too onerous. Okay, Min has a question. Why do senior lose external inner control? Well, that's a very good question. As with many things in the body, as you age, right? The neuronal connection might not be as strong, right, anymore between certain parts of the body. It's not just the external sphincter that you lose control. As you age, like your reflexes it slows as well, right? Like you feel like your dexterity decrease, and all that has to do with the neuromuscular junction, like the interface between your neuron and your muscle, like just kind of losing its connection over time as we age. Right? So the external sphincter, that's just one of it. Colon bacteria is good bacteria. Yep, they're good because they form the normal flora barrier. And they also help make some vitamin for us. Okay, they take up the space, right, so that the bad ones don't get a hold, right? There is something actually called you can look it up. I don't want to talk about it now. It's called like a fecal transplant. Okay, it's useful for people who have lost their own normal flora. And if you transplant fecal matter from a donor to the person who's receiving it, it kind of helps replenish the normal flora. It's kind of bizarre if you think about it. Who would have thought of that? But it's actually a thing. Okay, before we go though, I want to do a coloring with you. Did you guys have a chance to get this yet? Like I know I said I just posted it. Let me do a quick poll. Is it okay if I label this one with you now? Like does most people have it? If you have it, please choose A. If you don't have it, please choose B. Like if it's okay to label this, please choose A. If it's not okay, then let me know. Okay, I'll post the link here. Oops, I only sent it to one person. Here, I'll post the link here for you to get it. I'm gonna wait like maybe a couple minutes for you to get it if you need to, and then I think we're gonna label it. I think that's probably a good thing to do. Okay, and if you don't have it yet, that's okay as well. You can come back to the recordings later. Because I'm gonna give you like 3 minutes to get it ready. Okay, I'll be back. All right, let's take a look at this guy here. So, first thing first, we're gonna have the mouth here. Mouth or oral cavity. Okay, that's where you put the food in. We have our salivary gland. There's one right here, another one there, another one there. So this one is next to the ear. That's the parotid. Salivary gland. This one is underneath the tongue. Tongue is actually really big. Right? What we see is only a bit of it. And that would be the sublingual. When you're bilingual, you speak two languages, right? Lingual, like tongue. your mother tongue, your first language, right? So sublingual means underneath the tongue. Sublingual salivary gland. And then we have another one here, the submandibular. Salivary gland. And that here, that is the tongue. The tongue. The tongue. So that's a nasal cavity. And this little thing that's dangling, that's the uvula. It will seal the nasal cavity when we're swallowing. Over here, that's the back of the throat or the pharynx. So far, nothing new. And that here is the esophagus. All right. And in the diaphragm right here, there is an esophageal hiatus. Allows the esophagus to go through. Okay, then we have our stomach. Let's just choose a light color here. That's the stomach. And you may remember there is the cardiac sphincter up here. And then there is the pyloric sphincter down here. Okay. If the cardiac sphincter does not do its job properly, then you have heartburn. And the pyloric sphincter will control how much chyme, chyme, how much chyme goes forward. Now there is a bit of a thing here. It's not really related. It's not related to digestion at all, but it's just here to show you as a reference. Anybody know what that thing might be? We learned this like long time ago, like lecture 2 or 3 maybe. Yep, Brill is correct. That is the spleen. And the spleen helps stores blood, right? And perform immune functions. Okay, we have a pancreas here at the back, behind the stomach. Pancreas secretes pancreatic juices with the sodium bicarbonate to neutralize the chyme, as well as the gastric juices. There is the liver. Okay. In terms of digestion, liver helps make the bile, but there are a bunch of other functions that we talked about, right? Making plasma proteins, storing vitamins, storing glycogen. Now you can't really see it too well, but believe me, it's here. There's a little bit, it's kind of peeking his head a little bit right here. Okay. And we need to add a label to it. That would be the gallbladder. Stores the bile, secretes it into the duodenum. All right. It's getting very busy, the diagram. So try to stay with me. This is the first part of the small intestine. Okay. If you're able to see through it, it will continue like that behind your large intestine right here, behind your colon. I'm just gonna put dotted line here. That's the first part. Just gotta use a different shade of green here to show the second part. What's this thing right here? And then it's gonna be another one right here. Okay. I'm not sure what the best way to do this is. I'm just gonna call it 1, 2, and 3. Okay, I'm just gonna use this label. Okay, so that's the small intestine. Okay, and it's broken down into 3 parts, right? One is this one, that's the duodenum. Jejunum and ileum. Okay, 3 parts. Smallest part is the shortest part is the duodenum. That's where digestions occur. That's where the pancreatic juice and the bile is gonna go. 2 and 3 would be for absorption. Okay, and remember, the small intestine has those circular folds, the villi and the microvilli to help increase surface area. All right, next we have the large intestine. I'm just gonna use different shades of blue this time, maybe. Okay, so we have the cecum. And then we have the colon here. I'm gonna alternate the colors as they change names, okay? There we go. There's a little bit of dangling thing right here. Right. So this is the appendix. Okay. So no particular function, right? At some point it might have a key role in playing a key role in digesting fibers, as well as part of your immune system, but it doesn't really do much. If it gets infected, and sometimes it does, then it might cause appendicitis. You're gonna have to remove it. If you don't remove it quick enough, then it might explode, and then all the contents from your large intestine, the poopy stuff, it's gonna come out into your abdominal cavity, and that's gonna lead to major infection. That's called peritonitis, and that could kill you. Okay, so this first part here is called the cecum, C-E-C-U-M. Okay, don't forget there's another sphincter here. I'm adding a lot of stuff, sorry. That's the ileocecal sphincter. Okay, it's just like a boundary, right, between the last part of the small intestine, the ileum, and the first part of your large intestine, the cecum. Like I said, we don't want the poopy stuff to go back, right? So we shouldn't really be calling it food now, anyways. But then the food, it's gonna go into the cecum. It's gonna go up, across, down, sideways, and then it's gonna stay here until it's ready to come out. So going up, that's the ascending colon. Across, that's the transverse colon. Well, if going up is ascending, then coming down must be descending colon. It's going to go down. And then you have a little bit of a sideways thing here. That's called a sigmoid. Sigmoid colon. And then finally, we store it in the rectum. And then that's the anus. And of course, there are two other sphincters here, right? External and internal. Anal sphincter. And there you have it. The completely labeled diagram. Okay. So that is that. Now I actually got confused last week when I had a lesson with you guys. Like for some reason I thought we were doing this in person, and then I saw the lab and thought we actually physically have to do the lab. So that's why I said, oh, we're not gonna have enough time. We have to, postpone the test. But looks like we're gonna have enough time. But whatever, right? I don't want to cause more confusion. Since I said we're gonna move the test to the 22nd, we're still gonna keep the test on the 22nd. Okay, but here's what's gonna happen, right? Wednesday we're gonna do the test 2 review, which I think is already posted. Let me just quickly check to see if it is. Here, I'll show you where I'm looking at. So this is the table of content, and then test review. Yep, number 2 is already up. Okay, so we're gonna take that up Wednesday. We will also do the lab, take up the online lab number 2, right? Okay, and those things will serve as the review for test number 2. Okay, and then you will do the lab quiz. I'll postpone. I will open the lab quiz until all the way to the 21st, okay, the day before the test. Okay, but next Monday though, we have to start on the renal system. Okay, it's not really ideal to learn something before your test, but because I kind of mess up the test dates, right? That's what we're gonna have to do. Okay, so all review on Wednesday's class. Monday we'll start the renal system, and then we'll take the test on Wednesday. No class on Wednesday then, right? Wednesday you just take the test and you don't come to class. Is that okay? I'll type all this up on the eCentennial. But any questions before you go? Okay, well, thank you for coming. I will see you all on Wednesday morning. Okay? Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.